So hey and what's up guys, this is Code Cruise, and in the previous video as we have all seen, that is basically we have built the front end of this application, that is the home page and the login page, and as you can see, yeah, login, then the register page. So this is basically the UI part which we have built, and today we are going to be building the APIs. Like that is basically the backend of this application, which will be built using Next.js. So using Next.js, how can we write APIs? So Next.js in the app directory, what we need to do is basically we have to create a directory called API. And inside that, we can basically be creating all the routes that basically is required in order to run the like the API endpoints, right? So let's create a directory named API. Okay. And inside the directory, we can like figure out our APIs, what kind of API which we are going to be building. So first things first, as you can see, this is sign out, and then there is sign in. So for this, we need to create the authentication APIs, right, at first. So let's create it. So let's create another directory here that is named auth. Okay. And inside this auth directory, we'll be creating another directory that would be named as register. Okay. And inside the auth directory, only we'll be creating another directory that will be named as login. Okay. So, uh, and as I've shown you, like how the routing and all this thing works in Next.js. So whenever we want to like route a component, we need to basically create a directory of that particular name of that particular route, right? And then you have to create a page.js file and then so on and so forth. So here also we need to create we're creating the directory, right? So we need to create a file, and here the file naming convention which we need to follow is called route.js, right? So for register, we have created this route.js. So make sure you name the file as route, else it won't work. And here we can actually import next request and next response from next server, right? And then we need to basically create a handler function, right? Right. Whenever we are going to that route, so there should be some handler function attached to it. Okay. So or else it won't respond to our request, right? So let's create a handler function that is going to be export function. Make sure you don't use export default. It is going to be export function and the method name, like whatever method we want to put into it. Like if we want a get method, then it is going to be a get. Like I know like for register, for login, and for all this stuff, we don't need to make any get request. We need to make a post request, but just like for a test purpose, I'm just trying to start with a get function. Right, I'll be modifying it later in this video. So what we're going to be using is request, right? It will take a request as an argument, export function, get request, okay. And what it is going to be returning, right? So basically for just for testing purposes, like just for the sake of testing, we are just like just in order to show you like how this things are working. So we are going to be returning next response a JSON response will work like with a message called it works. Okay. And also I guess we can additionally add some status, like that is a status code, right? We can add a status code of 200 here. We can save this part, right? And here we can try this out. Like if we just try to go for API slash auth slash what is the thing, right? It is I guess the register one, right? Yeah, the register. Yeah, that's the register. And yeah, as you can see, it returns us this message that it works, right? Since our API is up and running, it works, right? So let's do that. Okay. We won't be testing APIs here. Like we can test APIs within Thunder client, right? Like they can basically be providing HTTP local host the localhost 3000 slash API slash or slash uh, register, right? And if we just send this request, it gives us a response and with our status code of 300 and whatever, right? So we can test it here. Okay. So, okay. Let's build the actual route. So this is not going to be a get request, it is going to be a post request since we are registering, right? And before all of this, we first of all, since we are like involving a database as well, like the data, whatever we'll be creating here would be a persistent and the data is going to be stored in our database. So we are going to be using MongoDB, right? So for storing the data and actually for storing the user as well, we actually need to create a user model like based on which the user should be stored on the database. So here in the app, like not in the API directly, like in the app directly, we can create a folder called models, right? Right, models. And here, what like we'll be basically defining the models. Like there will be the user model, and inside the models there will be another one. That is what more model we need. Like there will be a model for the user and there will be a model for the to-dos, right? So to-do model.js, right? And so for defining the models and all this stuff for interacting with the database and all that. So first thing first, let's create our MongoDB database, right? So let's go here, MongoDB. MongoDB, let's we can easily get it from here. Okay, so create this, right? And let's wait till it opens up. Okay, so we can basically sign in, and if you're new to it, then you can easily sign up through Google or like GitHub or any sign up options as it provides. Like I will be signing in to Google, and there it is, my account. And yeah, so previously I've created Next to do, right? So now I have to actually create a new database. Okay, so for creating a new database, what I have to do is you have to go for a new project, right? Here you can find this thing and then go for a new project and set it very, yeah. It will be asking me the project name, right? I already have made the next to the database. So like let me uh, start from the start so that you guys can have a better understanding of how actually you can create a project in MongoDB and set up the database, right? So the project name, let's name it as to do to do next, right? To do this, to do next, or to do next app, something like that. Okay. So at first we don't want to add any tabs or something like that. We're moving next. And okay, the members definitions. I don't want to add members. Like if you are actually working on some group project along with your friends, like you guys can like add members. Like so, I'm creating the project. Okay, so create a deployment. Okay, let me click on create. Okay, so these are all the paid plans, right? So we are going to be taking the free one, that is the M0, right? Free plan. And there's a cluster name. You can add any cluster name you want. There are providers, different providers like AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, like whatever fits you. And just for the sake of the video, I'm taking AWS. Okay. And now let's create the deployment. Okay. So it asks for some password or something like that. Right. So, okay, we can be using the password that will be generated by them, or I can like basically provide a very simple password or something like that. So it doesn't matter much, but yeah. So let me copy it and store it somewhere. Since these passwords and all this are like credentials that need to be kept safe. So we like if you are like pushing your project to your GitHub repository or something like that, so they should be pushed along with them, right? So this password specifically could be like kept in some env files from which you will be like accessing in your within your project, right? For example, uh, this is the app directory. Okay, so the root directory, we can basically create an env file, and here we can basically provide the password and whatever it is, right? So here we can keep it, but just I need to copy this stuff because I will be forgetting this password now since this is a random string. So password equals like I'm just storing it here, right? Whenever we are getting the connection string, we'll just replace it, and then we can choose a connection method. Uh, okay, create database user. Okay, then we can choose a connection method like using which we can connect to it, right? And okay, there's driver and all this stuff that has been included. Okay, okay, do that, and there is IP access list. So this is the IP that can actually access this database and its services. But like I'm currently like changing it to any 0.0.0.0. Like anyone having the connection string can actually access it, right? Just for the sake of this club. Like you can also like add certain IP addresses which can only like access the database. It's entirely up to you. Database is depending. Database, let's go into database. Okay, so it's deploying. And if we want to connect to it, meanwhile, like the drivers and all this stuff, like this is the connection string as I told you. So in order to connect to the database and interact with the database, we can like install a package that is called Mongoose. We'll be doing npm I Mongoose that will help us in connecting with our database. Okay, so okay, let's wait till it installs it, right? And now what we are going to do is let's create a library file that will actually be like used to like add some reusable functions into it. So okay, in the app directory, we'll be creating another folder named as live or library, whatever you call it. And here we are going to be creating connectdb.js. Here all the connections and all that will happen. Okay, so I guess our database is pretty much good to go, right? So let's click on this connect, and here we can get the connection string. We can copy it, and okay, as I told you, we have to place it in the env. Like we should place it in the env, or like it can also work. Like if you direct put the connection string, it works well and fine, but it will be exposing the um, connection string of our database like to the public, right? So here there will be DB URL or something like that. We can say it and we can place it. And here, as we can see, everything is fine except this password, right? So here we need to basically provide this password so that we can connect to our database. All right. So let's paste our password. Okay. And let's save it. And now in the connect.db.js, we can basically import mongoose from mongoose. Okay. And now we can basically create a function, right? That is export function connect db. I'm just naming it connect db. You can name it whatever you wish to. And here we are using a try block and a catch block, right? The catch block will be basically used to handle the errors, right? Console log, right? Um, could not connect to db, okay? And like logging the error, whatever is the error. And the try block, what I'm going to do is, okay, so we are also going to like provide like it is going to be an asynchronous function, right? So and on connect, it's going to be await mongoose dot connect, and what unlike what string are we going to provide? By connection string, we can provide it directly, but since we are using it from the env file, we are going to be using process.env dot right dot and what was there in the env, that is db url, and that is what we will be going to put in here. And then we are going to be console logging this stuff that is connected to MongoDB, right? If it doesn't connect to MongoDB, then it would show the error, like what happened, like why it couldn't connect, right? Okay, so till this, I guess it's okay and that's fine, right? And now what shall we do is mm, let's move on to the models, and we can like begin to basically define our schema, right? So let's first of all define the user schema, right? So that we can start working with the, like user APIs and all this stuff, like the register, login, and authentication. So let's import it. Import mongoose. We will be definitely be needing mongoose for interacting with the database and stuff. So here basically we'll be defining the schema, const user schema, and new mongoose dot schema. So now the question comes is like, what is basically the schema? The schema is basically the logical structure of the database. Like basically the logical structure, if you ask me what is it, like for example, in the login, let's move to register. In the register page, what do we have? Like for an user, like it will be our database is going to store the records of the users, right? So uh, each record would have certain format, right? So that particular format is basically the schema, right? So for users, what format it is going to be? So the format is going to be the full name, then the format is going to be an email address. It will have an email address. Then it is going to have a password, right? These three things are necessary in order to create a record for a user, right? So a username should be there, an email address should be there, a password should be there, right? So let's create it. So here we'll be going to name a full name, okay? And here we have to define the type. So the type of the full name is going to be a string, right? And required to be true means like if someone has to create a record for an user, that this full name thing is a necessary condition. Like if someone doesn't provide the full name for the user, then like we cannot actually create a document or a record for a user. So all the three fields actually are mandatory ones. So here also we are going to be providing the email address, right? What is an email address? It is also a type of string, right? That is basically it is also required to, um, yeah, and here for password, what it is going to be, it is also a type of string, required to, right? So, okay. So I think it's fine. And now what we are going to do is const user, like create the model. And here we are using models dot uh, models dot user and models dot or models dot model dot models dot model and here it is going to be user. So what it does is, first of all, it checks whether uh, user model is already existing in the database or not. If it is existing, then okay, we are creating the record. If it's not an existing model in our database, so it creates this particular model as per the required, configurations as given here, and then it basically stores the data whatever it has provided, right? And we can export default user, right? We have what is the user model, right? And now what else doing, right? And also we can like add another thing here that is basically the timestamp at which the user was created. If we want, we can. If we don't want to, it's up to you. We can add the timestamp. I think. Okay. Okay. So it's created, right? We can do the same for actually the the Todo model, right? We need to create a schema. So let's create it real quick. So import boundaries and what I'm going to do is once to do schema first of new boundaries dot schema here. So let's think of what can we add for to do schema. So what actually to do is going to have, right? So a to-do is going to have a title. A to-do is going to have some description, like based on the title. Okay. And then it is going to have a, deadline, right? And also it is going to have a flag value, like is completed or not, like the to-do is a completed one or not, like right? Like once we complete our to-do, we'll be marking it as done, right? So that is a flag value that will enable us know whether it is completed or not, right? So yeah, so that's pretty much about it. So let's code it. So there is the title and it's of type string, right? And then its requirement is true, okay? And here, what more like that? There is the description, right? So the data is yeah, that description. It is also the same thing, right? We'll be copying the same method here, right? And then the deadline, right? And it is going to be type of string. No, it is not going to be a type of string. It is going to be a type of date, right? So it's a date, right? The deadline and all that. And it's required to so that we can place this thing here. And now, after the deadline, what more we need, right? What more is the flag value that is complete or not, right? That is going to be a type of Boolean, right? Since it will only be holding two values, either completed, so it will be true, And if it's not completed, it's going to be a false. So type boolean required to, and also we can add another parameter that is the default, and its default value is going to be false, right? Default, like by default, whenever you are creating some to do, so by default it is going to be false, right? Like by default, it is not going to be completed. Whenever you're creating a to do, by default it is not going to be a completed one, right? Like after we create a to do, after that it is going to be like once we mark it as completed, then it is going to be so by default it's going to be false, right? No worries. Now, also we can like add something like push to do is that, right? So we also need to add created by, right? And here created by to basically relate it to the user who has like actually created that to do. So its type is going to be like created by is going to be holding some object ID of the user, which like now what is an object ID? It is basically whenever we are creating any record in a MongoDB database, so that particular each of the record or each of the users we are creating out there, or each of the to-dos we are creating out there, MongoDB will be assigning it a like a special like set of characters, right? It's a special set of characters, or we can say a ID card. Like whenever you go to schools or colleges, you are being assigned with a like registration number or something like that, right? That uniquely identifies you, right? So here also similar case, like it assigns a ID to it. So that is basically the object ID. So basically it so this is since we are going to be storing the object ID of the user who has created the to do. So this type is going to be object ID, right? So and also like we can basically take this from here, like forms, and let this structuring object.id from mongoose.schema.types and this. Yeah. And then this thing, and we also need to reference to some user uh like reference to which like schema or to which actually the document we're referring to, right? So that is going to be user, since here as you if you remember this, here in the user model, like we have like perform this, like the name is user, like for the particular model the name is user, so it is the model name, right? And then if we want, like we can add timestamps here as well, if we want to find once, yeah. And the rest of the thing is going to be similar, like that to do, and models dot models dot to do, and it will mongoose dot model dot um yeah, no, this is going to be this to do, and yeah, and something's yeah. So one thing we are forgetting here is basically it's mongoose dot model dot to do, and basically we also need to provide the schema as well, like based on which the model is going to be created, right? So I just missed out on it. Okay, so there it is going to be to do schema. Okay, now I think it's all. So we can export default to do. Okay, that's fine. And here also I need to make this change, like there is a user and we need to basically provide the user schema, right? Or else based on what schema it is gonna create the model, right? So yeah, if that was a mistake on my side. Okay, so yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Like we are done with the models, right? Whatever model is being required by this project, we are done with. So now, so what more we need to do? So now we need to basically be creating the route for registering the users, right? So registering the users. So let's move on to route.js. And for registering the users, what are the things that will be primarily be requiring, right? So let's remove this stuff there. And now this function is going to be an SA function, right? And okay, so let's start with like going to like use a try catch block here. Like if anything goes wrong, it can like throw us or provide us some error, throw some error. Like we are using a catch block that is gonna handle the error and store log or shall we do a console log or no? Let's do it like let it send back a response only, not request response dot JSON, and it's going to be pending. Status going out from 900 estimate that. And here now what we need to do. So whenever we are going to be making a post request, like we are basically creating some data in the database, right? That is registering the user. So we are going to be getting the username, the email address, and the password as the request body. So we can basically destructure that thing from the request body, right? And okay, and first of all, let's do the concept body, and it's going to be await request. Like from the request object, only we can find it out. So the JSON, and here we can basically destructure the name, uh, not really the name, whatever we have named. Like let's find out in our user model. It's the full name, right? Full name, and then where it is the email password, right? Email and the right. And okay, we can destructure these three things from the body. And the first thing we'll be checking that since the three of them are required, so if any one of them is null or holds no value, so what we are going to be doing is like send back the user that one of the fields are missing, right? So if either of them is null, we are straight away gonna return next response dot JSON, and it's going to be providing some error. List one or more required fields are missing, right? And here we are gonna provide a status code of 422. That means it's an unprocessable entity length, if I am correct. Okay. So then we basically need to validate the emails which we are getting, right? For example, in case of some email address, if we are like providing something else, right? So that is gonna be a problem. So in order to validate that, we can use uh, this package called as validator.js. This can help us in validating the thing, right? Whether or not our email and all that is fine, right? So we are gonna use this. So we can install it. So you can check out this. Okay. So okay. Okay. I think it's installed. Yeah, it's installed. So we are gonna import validator, and here now the next check which we are trying to make is if email sorry, it is going to be validator dot is email, and we are passing the email. So what we are going to check is whether or not it's really an email or not. So if it's not an email, right? If it's not an email, then we are going to be providing next response JSON and an error, right? Uh, Please enter valid email address, right? And status code, it is also going to be an unprocessable entity. And now, what more do we need? We can actually set something for our password as well, right? Like, some uh, validation or check, like, let's keep it simple. Like, we want the password dot length shouldn't be less than 6 characters, right? Okay. Or yeah, and we can return next response dot JSON, and it's going to be password length should be minimum of 6 characters. Okay, and it's going to be status code. Okay. So now, what more can we do to it? So now, since we have checked whether or not each of the fields are empty or not, and whether or not this email thing is a valid email or not, and then we have validated the password as well. Now, another thing exists that is basically to check whether or not the user who is trying to register is already a registered user or not. If the user is already registered user, then we cannot register him again, right? So that would lead to a duplicate data. So what we are going to be doing is we are going to be like checking this from the database. And for that, we need to basically connect to the database, right? So we can use await connect DB, right? And yeah, once we have made successful connection to the database, now we can basically check const existing user, right? And there it is going to be we are taking user model, and we are going to be find the user using the email address, right? Right, using the email address, we are going to be understanding like whether or not the email user exists or not. Now we are going to be like existing user this or whatever the query we are using, the user dot find. So it basically returns us an array of the database objects or whatever it is. So basically, we can say that if the existing user dot length and I think yeah, and to add an await also like if you're running the query, so it will take some time. So if the existing user dot length, okay, if the existing user dot length is equals 0, means like the uh, array that is being returned is an empty array. That means it hasn't found a single user that is existing with that particular email. So that basically validates that okay, the user who is trying to register hasn't registered before. So he's a new user, right? So that means what? That means that okay, we can allow that user to register. So the length in this case couldn't be equal to 0, right? If the length is not equals to 0, then that means we have found some user with that particular email. So that means we'll be returning that the user is already an existing user, you know, mm, user already exists. Please log in, right? Since the user already exists, right? So please log in, and there will be a status code of let me remember. I guess it is going to be status code of 403. Mm, okay, let's open program status code for user already exists. Let's check. Okay, so what it is? Okay, 409 conflicts. Yeah, so it is going to be a 409 scenario. That is 409. That is the thing that we are going to be like it already exists, right? That is a conflicting set. So status is 409. Okay, so let's close this. Okay, from here. And what more? Is there any more condition we are missing on? Um, I don't think so. There is nothing like new condition which we need to put onto it. Like we have tested nearly each and every condition. So now what we need to do is we need to hash the password, right? That is the thing. Like there's no condition of checking here. We have to have the password. So like we can store the user data from now on, like we can store it in our database. But what if our database gets hacked somehow? So like it all the data will be like, going into the hands of the hacker or like whoever is performing that malicious activity. So all the passwords should also be revealed. So it is advised that we hack the passwords and then we store it in the database. So once the password is been hashed, so it is not into any readable format for anyone to actually, understand that thing or like generate or decode the password out of it, right? So for that, we need to use a package called bcrypt. So you can also check it out here, like just like the validator, bcrypt. Okay. Yeah. Right. This is the library. Okay. So what we can do is we can basically copy it and we can paste it here. Let's install it. It will take a couple of seconds to install. Right. And then we can actually import bcrypt and start the hashing process. Right. So let's wait for some time. Right. Yeah. It's done. So let's import bcrypt from bcrypt. Okay. Sounds fair enough. So now, what we need to do is, let's mm, perform like const hash password, and let's do await bcrypt, and it's going to be hash. Yeah, hash the password, and what password are we going to be hashing? So that is the password that we have retrieved from the request.body. So we are going to be hashing that particular password. So, and it also takes another thing that is basically the solve rounds, which you can provide a number of what choice. Like I prefer using like 10 solve rounds. So, okay. So, now, I guess we are nearly done with all the like checks as well as we have hashed our password as well. So what we need to do is now this record we have to like persist it in our database. So for that, what we need to do is const new user. We're creating instance of the new user, and here what we are providing is full name, right? As per the user model, right? Full name, email, sorry, email, right? We can use email like this as well. But since both the names are same, like email, so we're using email. And now for password, what we're going to do is, are we going to store this password? No. We are going to be storing this hashed password. So it's going to be a hashed password. And then what can we do? What can we do is basically await dot new user, and then we are going to use dot save, right? And yeah, and now we can return a success message that is next response dot JSON, and it's going to be success user registered successful. Okay, and here there will be a status code of 200, right? Like, okay, so I guess this is the API for registering an user. So for like when you test this thing out, right? So we can test it out using in the client, right? We can use Postman as well. So like for now, let's use in the client. So let's go to post, and now we need the body, right? So here, let's provide full name and for the time being. Uh, then there is email. Then there is something as password, right? And three of the fields are empty, right? So what should it return us, right? As per our logic, it should return us some of the fields are missing, right? So let's send a push request. If our API is working fine, and it would be sending us back like the response which we were waiting for. Yeah, as you can see, status 422 unprocessable entity, error one or more required fields are missing, right? Like if I provide full name as code proofs, right? And email we are leaving it, and if I try it, it still gives this particular error. So in the email, we can provide like code and and the password we are providing pass like this. Now let's send it, and we get a why. Please enter a valid email address. So is our email address valid? No, our email address is not valid. So let's provide code proofs at the rate gmail.com. So this password and this email address is valid. So now let's try to register. Yeah, again we get another. Why? Because our password length should be minimum of 6 characters, and our password length is of 5 characters, so it is giving us an error. So let for the time being, let's use a password like this. Okay. So now you can see it will successfully register the user. So let's test it out. Okay. Let me take some time. Yeah. As you can see, the status code is 200. Okay, the successfully registered user, right? So now, what if we try to, like now, if we try to register this user again, let's see what it happens. Let's try to do it. And it sends back an error along with the status code of 409 conflict. Why? Because this particular users has already been registered now only, so it cannot be registered again, right? So we send it again and again to the gonna like say, bro, change the email ID, try again because this user already exists. So how do we see that whether our the user we have created has successfully been stored into our database? So for that, let's move to our database and now let's okay, is it and let's browse collections. Here we can see our users that have been stored in the database. Mm, Okay, this is basically a sample thing. I guess, yeah, this is the thing which we have created. That is basically the user. Uh, what is it? Okay, I guess this is basically a sample result out there. Okay, okay, I guess this one is the thing we are searching for. Yeah. We got it. We got it. So that is basically the sample one that has been basically being provided by MongoDB. And here we get the test users. And here, as we can see, we got an object ID. As I told you, like MongoDB assigns some unique object ID to every record we basically hold here. You can see the full name as code tools, email as code tools, and then in the password, as you can see, we have provided the password as password, but it is basically hashing the password and then storing it. So as you can see, it's basically been stored into some unreadable format, like in a format with which you can never guess the password of the user, even if your database leaks, right? So, and it shows created as like since we are using timestamps, like we have used timestamps as proof, so it provides us a timestamp as well. Like when this user was created or something like that. So yeah, so hence our register API is finally working fine, right? So what we need to do now? So now we need to basically let's move on to login, right? Let's move on to login and let's create our route JS, right? So our register API is working perfectly. So now let's move on to our login. So in login, what we need to do? So let's get started with it. Then we'll figure out, like, on the way, what we need to do or what are we supposed to do, right? Now, let us import the next response. We actually are not needing the next request or something like that. So we're using the next response. And now export function, and this function is going to be an asynchronous function, and it is also going to be a post request, and it is going to take a request as a parameter. And now, what are the things that it will be requiring, right? It is going to be requiring the request button. So let's check out our login form. Let's click on sign in. Yeah. And here, what are the things that it requires? It requires email ID and it requires the password. Fair enough. Fair enough. So let's move on to our editor. And here, what we need to take, we basically need to take from the body, okay, body, await, request, JSON format, and request dot body. Sorry, we need to do request dot JSON, and then we need to basically destructure the email and the password, right? And it might be from the body. And now what we need to do is we need to make a check, the same check. Like we cannot provide some like empty email, right? And also we are gonna use it in a try catch block, right? If anything doesn't work, so also the crash activate. Yeah, right. It's going to be next response JSON. It's going to be error, and it's going to be a status code of 5. Okay, that's okay. And we are going to be returning next response dot JSON, and then there we are going to be performing. Okay, so let's copy it from here. Just same thing, this point, right? Paste this very thing, right? And another thing also we'll be using, that is basically we need to be validating the email, right? So that validation part also you can take it up from there, right? Okay, so import validator from validator, and this also you can easily validate whether the email is valid or. So now, what are the things that we need to take into consideration? Since in the register one, we need to check whether or not the user was already registered or not. If the user was already registered, then we cannot actually like proceed further with that user since we cannot re-register that user, right? So in the case of login, it is just the opposite. Here we need to check whether or not the user is registered or not. If the user is already registered, then okay, he will be granted like login provided he provides the like proper password for it. And if the user doesn't exist in the database, then we can like throw an error that okay, he is not authorized. So he should first of all register, right? So yeah, let's take this condition now. Const existing user await, and also for this, what we need to do, we need to basically connect to the database in order to confirm the fact that like since we are going to be running a query, right, that is going to be checking the user from the DB. So, okay, so we can do user dot, okay, wait a minute. So, yes, from the user model and dot find, and here find using the email, right? And if existing user dot length is triple equals 0, then we are gonna return, right, next response dot JSON as error, uh, user not found, please register, right? And here we have to provide a status code of 404 not found. And then what we are going to be doing is, then we need to, if the user, like till now, if the user already exists in the database and all that, what we need to do is basically now we need to check the password that the user is providing, whether or not the password is correct or not. So how we do it? First of all, we need to basically import bcrypt from bcrypt, right? And here, what are we going to do is const check password, right? And we are going to be comparing, compare, and we need to be comparing the password that is being provided from the user, right? Like that is basically the password that is being provided now and the password that the existing user is holding. So the existing user password from where we can get it. So we can basically get that particular password from the existing user, right? Like fair enough. So what can we do here? So basically, it basically returns us an array of object of the user that it has found. So we can compare it as like existing user since it's an array, and since we are like every user has a unique email, so the array is going to be comprising of a single object only. So we can basically access the zeroth index of the array, and then from there we can like retrieve the password, and we can basically make a check for it. And if the check is fine, then it's okay, like we can proceed further. And if the check is not fine, then we can basically like do like something like send a error response that the password is enough. So if check password doesn't work out, then return next response dot JSON and return error, passwords do not match, right? And then there will be a status code that is going to be same, that is like the status code for unauthorized, right? So what's the status code for unauthorized? Let me check. Status code for unauthorized or something like that. That's 401, right? Why not invalid credentials? Okay, okay. So 401 is the status code to return when the client provides no credentials or invalid credentials. 403 forbidden is the status code to return when the client has valid credentials but is not authorized to perform that particular act. So in our case here we need to provide 401, right? Since we are unauthorized or unauthenticated user, as you can say, right? So now if the password check is also successful and the user has passed the thing. So we basically need some authorization, right? Like when like there is two things, right? Like there is one side is authentication, like we are providing some credentials and we are getting authenticated into the system. And then there is an authorization. Authorization is basically after authentication, you can be provided a token, right? Using which you can basically authorize yourself to perform different actions, right? For example, like whenever the user is going to be creating the to-do, so the server should actually understand, okay, this user holds this token and all this. So based on that authorization, it will be allowing the user, or it will be providing the privilege to the user to, okay, the user can perform this particular action. For example, if an user has created a to do, and if he wants to delete that particular to do, so the user who has created that to do should only be authorized to delete that to do, right? Not the any other user who hasn't deleted it, right? So yeah, that's how the authorization things work. So we can use a token-based authorization here using JSON web tokens, right? So we can go to npm I JSON web token, right? So yeah, this is the thing. And from here, we can basically perform these things, right? So what can we do is, it's pretty simple and straightforward. We can basically install it. It will take some time. Okay, okay, it's done. Now, what we need to do is we need to import JSON web token from JSON web token, right? And now, what we need to do is we need to basically generate a token, right, based on the use of token equals await and JSON web token dot find, right? We can see it here, right? Sign. Then here we'll be providing with the email, and then there's going to be some private key. And by default, uses some algorithm. Like if we want to specify some algorithm explicitly, we can specify it using this. But like now if we don't want to specify some different algorithm, just providing this object and this private key works fine, right? So what are you going to do is we are going to be providing our email, right? And then there will be a private. So what it is going to be a private key? So it's going to be a private key. So it's going to be some credentials, right? So we don't want to expose our credentials, right? So we can go to our env and we can basically create an environment variable called as private key, and uh, any private key will work. So if you want to generate some string, random string generator, yeah, from random.org, we can pretty much generate 10 uppercase, lowercase letters. Okay, fine. And if we try to get strings from it, it basically gives you some random strings. Like just if you want to provide some strings, and yeah, it's just a random string provided. That is basically the private. So okay, let's generate it. And we can use process.env dot private. Okay, let's pick it up from here. Copy and let's paste it in. Yeah, the private. Okay. And now what we need to do is once once we have logged into the system, so we should send this token as a cookie in our browser, right? So what can we do is after all of this, we can return next response dot JSON, and what it is going to be doing is success, and it is going to be uh, for example, logged in successfully, right? And what is this going to be the status code? Let's provide the status code of 200. And also, since I've told, on the home page, as you can see, since I've told, this kind of a thing we are going to be getting, like hello code rule or something like that, like whatever your name is. So once we are logging in, we should also be like getting this data, right? So we can actually be, sending the, what to say, sending the uh, username along with it, right? So now the question arises, where do we get the username, right? So username is stored in the database. We can query the database using the email address we have, and we can get the username. So, and we have already, if you can see, we have already queried the database, right? When we are checking for the existing user. So if the user exists, we get the existing user data, right? So from there only we can basically extract the name out of it, right? So here, along with the success, we can basically provide the name as well, and that is going to be user, sorry, it's going to be existing user array, and it's going to be fake. I guess it's, let me check the user model, and there's pulling up, right? Let's check it. It's going to be pulling up, right? And yeah, so that's pretty much. And also we have to basically provide the cookies as well, right? So we can, I guess, train the cookies along with that cookies set. And what kind of a cookie are we going to be setting? We are going to be setting the token, right? Let's call it a token. And along with that, we can basically send the token, right? And yeah, along with that, we can be sending the token. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And for the sake of like logging it out the token, we can basically log the token as well, like just for the time being. Okay. Like just to show you whenever we are hitting the API, we are getting the token or not. And this stuff basically will be like basically reflected upon in the browser, right? So in the token, what we can do is basically send the token. So okay, so fair enough. So I don't think I have missed anything there. So I also like moment of truth. Let's try and check it out whether or not it's working. Register, it's login, right? Login. And here, what I can do is, um, let's try login using this. Like we don't need the full name of this there. So can just gonna remove it. And okay, like we can add another user as well. Like for example, John Do. Okay, John at the gmail.com. Password is same. Okay, sorry. This is going to be a register, right? Let's format. And yeah, user successfully registered. And if we refresh our page, we can actually check whether or not John Doe has, okay, John Doe is there. So now let's try it with this, right? The login. Let's try the login now. Register, instead of register, we are going to use login. And yeah, and let's remove the password field for time being. One or more required fields are missing. Okay, it works. And if I perform full name, passwords do not match since we have like provided a different password. And let's check. Please enter a valid email address. So all the checks that we have provided in our APIs are running pretty much well, right? So okay, and if I perform joining and if I provide something like that, okay, like if I provide some password as well, and it would say user not found, please register. So John is not someone who's being known to the database. So it's going to be John. And now let's try it out. It would definitely provide us, okay, wait a minute. Uh, internal server. So what did we go wrong? returns round handler. Okay, let's check return response. No response is written from the route handler. Ensure you return a response or a next response in all the branches of your handler. Okay, okay. I guess there's an issue. I think we cannot chain them together. I guess. Like, let me check. Okay. So for the time being, wait a minute. Let's create another variable that will hold our response, and then this we can basically chain this up. Okay, please, repeat dot set return token, and then we can send response. I guess this works. Okay, as the thing reflects, yes. And now let's try it out again. Yeah, now it's working. I guess for some reason or the other, we cannot actually, chain them together. So it's showing success, logged in successfully. And this is John Doe, right? The username. And this is basically the token which we are getting that can be used for authorization later, right? So yeah, so that is pretty much working. Okay, that's fine. So as we can see that, and we are not going to be basically be sending the token along with it, since we are basically setting the token to the cookie only, right? We don't need to send the token explicitly, right? So yeah, so that's fine. Okay, so our login is working very, very fine. Like, let's try it again. Yeah, now it's working fine, perfectly fine. So we are done with our authentication part, if I say. So we are done with the authentication part. Basically, another thing that we can basically provide is basically the logout handler, right? That is basically nothing but like, logging out the user and basically deleting the cookie, right? That's pretty much what it means. So like if we just create another folder or logout, we can basically create a route for JS, and we can basically import next response, right, from the server, and then we can export function post request, and then we can basically use cookies, right, from next headers, and we can do is delete, right, and what we are going to be deleting, since there is the token which we want to delete, and then we should return some success message from next response.json, and it's going to be a success message that is, user logged out successfully, right? And we need to provide some status code. Well, let it be, or whatever it is. If we want to provide a status code, right? So you can basically log out a user just like this, right? And what more? Okay, so that's all about the authentication, right? Uh, and then what are the other routes which we need to create? The other routes are basically for creating the to-dos, then for updating the to-dos, that is basically marking the to-do as done, then deleting the to-dos, and also like fetching the to-dos to your screen, right? So these are all the other things that we need to do. So I think we are now like completely done with the authentication part, right? So we'll now see the create to do's part in the next video, right? So that's all for today's videos, guys. Hope you have enjoyed it and you have learned something from this. And in case you have learned something from this, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and also make some comments, right? Like if there's anything that I missed, if there's anything that could have been better, right? So yeah, so that's all for today's video, guys. We'll be back with the next video in which I will be like basically be creating the remaining APIs that is for creating, deleting, and updating the to-dos, right? So yeah, so till then, bye bye.